In our next story, once again, passions and prejudices, especially the latter, certainly do run deep. But we learn that there is an amazing way in which these can be overcome. This story, Percival Everett's The Appropriation of Cultures, is one of my all-time favorites and is a crowd pleaser at live readings, as listeners howl at the revelation of the hero's outrageous strategy. Percival Everett is the author of 16 novels, 3 collections of short fiction, and 2 volumes of poetry. The reader is the Broadway actor, Tony winner, and director Reuben Santiago Hudson. The Appropriation of Cultures.
Daniel Barkley had money left to him by his mother. He had a house which had been left to him by his mother. He had a degree in American Studies from Brown University, which he had in some way earned, but had not yet earned anything for him. He played a 1940 Martin guitar with a Barkus Berry pickup and drove a 1976 Jensen Interceptor, which he had purchased after his mother's sister had died and left him her money, she having had no children of her own. Daniel Barkley didn't work and didn't pretend to need to, spending most of his time reading. Some nights he went to a joint near the campus of the University of South Carolina and played jazz with some old guys who all worked very hard during the day but didn't hold Daniel's condition against him. Daniel played standards with the old guys, but what he loved to play was old-time slide tunes. One night, some white boys from a fraternity yelled forward to the stage at the black man holding the acoustic guitar and began to shout, "Play Dixie for us! Play Dixie for us!" Daniel gave them a long look, studied their big-toothed grins and their beer-shiny eyes stuck into puffy, pale faces, hovering over golf shirts and chinos. He looked from them to the uncomfortable expressions on the faces of the old guys with whom he was playing, and then to the embarrassed faces of the other college kids in the club. And then he started to play. He felt his way slowly through the chords of the song once and listened to the deadened hush as it fell over the room. He used the slide to squeeze out the melody of the song he had grown up hating, the song the whites had always pulled out to remind themselves and those other people just where they were. Daniel sang the song. He sang it slowly. He sang it, feeling the lyrics, deciding that the lyrics were his, deciding that the song was his. Old times there are not forgotten. He sang the song and listened to the silence around him. He resisted the urge to let satire ring through his voice. He meant what he sang. Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland. When he was finished, he looked up to see the room full of eyes on him. One person clapped, then another. And soon the tavern was filled with applause and hoots. He found the frat boys in the back and watched as they stormed out, a couple of people near the door chuckling at them as they passed. Roger, the old guy who played tenor sax, slapped Daniel on the back and said something like, "Right on," or "Cool." Roger then played the first few notes of Take the A Train, and they were off. When the set was done, all the college kids slapped Daniel on the back as he walked toward the bar where he found a beer waiting. Daniel didn't much care for the slaps on the back, but he didn't focus too much energy on that. He was busy trying to sort out his feelings about what he had just played. The irony of his playing the song straight and from the heart was made more ironic by the fact that as he played it, it came straight and from his heart. As he was claiming Southern soil, or at least recognizing his blood in it. His was the land of cotton, and hell no, it was not forgotten. At 23, his anger was fresh and typical, and so was his ease with it, the way it could be forgotten for chunks of time until something like that night with the white frat boys or simply a flashing blue light in the rearview mirror brought it all back. He liked the song, wanted to play it again, knew that he would. He drove home from the bar on Green Street and back to his house where he made tea and read about Pickett's charge at Gettysburg while he sat in the big leather chair which had been his father's. He fell asleep and had a dream in which he stopped Pickett's men on the Emmitsburg Road on their way to the field and said, "Give me back my flag." Daniel's friend Sarah was a very large woman with a very large afro hairdo. And they were sitting on the porch of Daniel's having tea. The late fall afternoon was mild and slightly overcast. Daniel sat in the wicker rocker while Sarah curled her feet under her on the glider. "I wish I could have heard it," Sarah said. "Yeah, me too. Personally, I can't even stand to go in that place, all that drinking. Those white kids love to drink." Sarah studied her fingernails. "I guess the place is harmless. They seem to like the music." You think I should paint my nails?" Daniel frowned at her. "If you want to. I mean, really paint them. You know, black or with red, white, and blue stripes, something like that." And she held her hand, appearing to imagine the colors. "I'd have to grow them long." "What are you talking about?" "Just bullshit." Daniel and Sarah went to a grocery market to buy food for lunch and Daniel's dinner. And Daniel pushed the cart through the Piggly Wiggly while Sarah walked ahead of him. And he watched her large movements and her confident stride. At the checkout, he added a bulletin full of pictures of local cars and trucks for sale to his items on the conveyor. "What's that for?" Sarah asked. "I think I want to buy a truck." "Buy a truck?" "Yeah, so I can drive you around when you paint your nails." Later, after lunch, and after Sarah had left him alone, Daniel sat in his living room and picked up the car sale magazine. As he suspected, there were several trucks he liked, and one in particular, a 1968 Ford 3/4 ton, with the one thing it shared with the other possibilities: a full rear cab window decal of the Confederate flag. He called the number the following morning and arranged with Barb, Travis's wife, to stop by and see the truck. Travis and Barb lived across the river in the town of Irmo, a name which Daniel had always thought suited a disease for cattle. He drove around the maze of tract homes until he found the right street and number. A woman in a housecoat across the street watched from her porch, safe inside the chain-link fence around her yard. From down the street, a man and a teenager who were covered with grease and apparently engaged in work on a torn-apart Dodge Charger mindlessly wiped their hands and studied him. Daniel walked across the front yard, through a maze of plastic toys, and knocked on the front door. Travis opened the door and asked in a surly voice, "What is it?" "I called about the truck," Daniel said. "Oh, you Dan?" Daniel nodded. "The truck in the backyard. Let me get the key." He pushed the door to, but it didn't catch. Daniel heard the quality of the exchange between Travis and Barb, but not the words. He did hear Barb say, as Travis pulled open the door, "I couldn't tell over the phone." "Got him," Travis said. "Come on with me." He looked at Daniel's Jensen as they walked through the yard. "What kind of car is that?" "It's a Jensen." "Nice looking. Is it fast?" "I guess." The truck looked a little rough. A pale blue with a bleached-out hood and a crack across the top of the windshield. Travis opened the driver's side door and pushed the key in the ignition. "It's a strong runner," he said. Daniel put his hand on the faded hood and felt the warmth, knew that Travis had already warmed up the motor. Travis turned the key, and the engine just kicked over. He nodded to Daniel. Daniel nodded back. He looked up to see a blonde woman looking on from behind the screen door of the back porch. "The clutch and alternator are new this year." Travis stepped backward to the wall of the bed, and he looked in. "There's some rust back here, but the bottom's pretty solid." Daniel attended to the sound of the engine. "Misses just a little," he said. "A tune-up fixed that." Daniel regarded the rebel flag decal covering the rear window of the cab. He touched it with his finger. Or that thing peeled right off," Travis said. "No, I like it." Daniel sat down in the trunk behind the steering wheel. "You mind if I take it for a spin?" "Sure thing." Travis looked toward the house, then back to Daniel. The brakes are good, but you got to press hard." Daniel nodded. Travis shut the door, his long fingers wrapped over the edge of the half-lowered glass. Daniel noticed that one of the man's fingernails was blackened. "I'll just take it around a block or two." The blonde woman was now standing outside the door on the concrete steps. Daniel put the truck in gear, and he drove out of the yard, past his car and down the street by the man and the teenager who was still at work on the Charger. They stared at him. were still watching him as he turned right at the corner. The truck handled decently, but that really wasn't important. Back at Travis's house, Daniel left the keys in the truck and he got out to observe the bald tires while Travis looked on. The ad in the magazine said 2,000. Yeah, but I'm willing to work with you. Tell you what, I'll give you 2,200 if you deliver it to my house. Travis was lost, scratching his head and looking back at the house for his wife, who was no longer standing there. Whereabout do you live? I live over near the university, near 5 Points. 2,200, Travis said more to himself than to Daniel. Sure, I can get it to your house. Here's 200. Daniel counted out the money and handed it to the man. I'll have the rest for you in cash when you deliver the truck. And he watched Travis feel the bills with his skinny fingers. Can you have it there by 4? Yeah, I can do that. What in the world do you need a truck for? Sarah asked. She stepped over to the counter and she poured herself another cup of coffee. And then she sat back down at the table with Daniel. I'm not buying the truck. Well, I am buying the truck, but only because I need the truck for the decal. I'm buying the decal. Decal? Yes, the truck has a Confederate flag in the back window. What? I've decided that the rebel flag is my flag. My blood is Southern blood, right? Well, it's my flag. Sarah put down her cup and saucer and she picked up a cookie from the plate in the middle of the table. You have flipped. I knew this would happen to you if you didn't work. See, a person needs to work. See, I don't need money. That's not the point. You don't have to work for money. And she stood and she walked to the edge of the porch and she looked up and down the street. Well, I got my books and my music. No, you need a job so you can be around people that you don't care about, doing stuff that you don't care about. You need a job to occupy that part of your brain. See, I suppose it's too late now, though. Nonetheless, Daniel said, you should have seen those redneck boys when I took Dixie from them. They didn't know what to do. So the goddamn flag is flying over the state capitals. Don't take it down, just take it. That's what I say. That's all you had to do? That's all there is to it? Yep. Daniel leaned back in his rocker. You watch old Travis when he gets here. Travis arrived with the pickup a little bit before 4. His wife pulling up behind him in a yellow Trans Am. Barb got out of the car, walked up to the porch with Travis, and she gave the house a careful look. Hey, Travis, Daniel said. This is my friend, Sarah. Travis nodded hello. You must be Barb, Daniel said. Barb smiled weakly. Travis looked at Sarah, then back at the truck, and then at Daniel. You sure you don't want me to peel that thing out the window? I'm positive. Okay. Daniel gave Sarah a glance to be sure that she was watching Travis's face. Here's the balance, he said, handing over the money. He took the truck keys from the skinny fingers. Barb sighed and asked, as if the question was burning right through her, why you want that flag on truck? Well, why shouldn't I want it? Daniel asked. Barb didn't know what to say. She studied her feet for a second and then regarded the house again. I mean, you live in a nice house and drive that sport car. What you need a truck like that for? You don't want the money? Oh, yeah, we want the money, Travis said, trying to silence Barb with a look. Well, I need the truck for hauling stuff, Daniel said. You know, like groceries, and he looked to Sarah for help. Books, Sarah said, books. Things like that. Daniel held Barb's eyes until she looked away. He watched Travis sign his name to the back of the title and hand it to him, and as he took it, he said, I was just lucky enough to find a truck with the Black Power flag already on it. What? Travis screwed up his face trying to understand. The Black Power flag on the window. You mean you didn't know? Travis and Barb looked at each other. Well, anyway, Daniel said, I'm glad we could do business. He turned to Sarah. Let me take you for a ride in my new truck. He and Sarah walked across the yard, got into the pickup, and waved to Travis and Barb, who were still standing in Daniel's yard as they drove away. Sarah was on the verge of hysterics by the time they were out of sight. That was beautiful, she said. No, Daniel said softly, no, that was true. Over the next weeks, sightings of Daniel and his truck proved problematic for some. He was accosted by 2 big white men in a '72 Monte Carlo in the parking lot of a 7-Eleven on Two Notch Road. "What you doing with that on your truck, boy?" the bigger of the two said. "Flying it proudly," Daniel said, noticing the rebel front plate on the Chevrolet. "Just like you, brothers." The confused second man took a step toward Daniel. "What did you call us?" "Brothers." The second man pushed Daniel in his chest with two extended fists, but not terribly hard. I don't want any trouble," Daniel told them. And then a Volkswagen with 4 black teenagers parked in the slot beside Daniel's truck, and they jumped out, staring and looking serious. "Yo, what's going on?" the driver and the largest of the teenagers asked. They were admiring our flag, Daniel said, pointing to his truck. The teenagers were confused. "We fly the flag proudly, don't we, young brothers?" Daniel gave a bent arm, black power, closed fist salute. "Don't we?" He repeated, "Don't we?" Yeah. The young man said. The white men had backed away to their car. They slipped into it and drove away. Daniel looked at the teenagers, and with as serious a face as he could manage, he said, "Get a flag and fly it proudly." At a gas station, a lawyer named Ahmad Wilson stood filling the tank of his BMW and staring at the back window of Daniel's truck. He then looked at Daniel. "Your truck?" he asked. Daniel stopped cleaning the windshield and he nodded. Wilson didn't ask a question, just pointed at the rear window of Daniel's pickup. "Power to the people," Daniel said and laughed. Daniel played Dixie in another bar in town, but this time with the R&B dance band at a banquet of the Black Medical Association. The strange looks and expressions of outrage changed to bemused laughter, and finally to open joking and acceptance as the song was played fast enough for dancing. Then the song was sung slowly, to the profound surprise of those singing the song. "I wish I was in the land of cotton. Old times there are not forgotten. Look away, look away, look away." Soon there were several, then many cars and trucks in Columbia, South Carolina, sporting Confederate flags and being driven by black people. Black businessmen and ministers wore rebel flag buttons on their lapels, clips on their ties. The marching band of South Carolina State College, a predominantly black land-grant institution in Orangeburg, paraded with the flag during homecoming. Black people all over the state flew the Confederate flag. The symbol began to disappear from the fronts of big rigs, in the back windows of jacked-up four-wheelers. And after the emblem was used to dress the yards and mark picnic sites of black family reunions, the following 4th of July, the piece of cloth was quietly dismissed from its station with the U.S. and state flags atop the state capitol. There was no ceremony, no notice. One day, it was not there. Look away, look away, look away.
Ruben Santiago Hudson read Percival Everett's The Appropriation of Cultures. Selected Shorts is produced by Catherine Minton and directed by Isaiah Sheffer. The executive director of Symphony Space is Cynthia Elliott. Our radio producer is Sarah Montague, and our production assistant is Miranda Schaefer. The readings are recorded by Miles B. Smith, and our mix engineer is Stu Kennedy. Major support for Selected Shorts is provided by Houghton Mifflin, publishers of the Best American Short Stories, edited in 2008 by Salman Rushdie, and by Barnes & Noble, booksellers since 1873, and on the web at bn.com. Additional support is provided by the Dungannon Foundation, sponsor of the Ray Award for the Short Story, Budget Travel, the National Endowment for the Arts, which believes that a great nation deserves great art, the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency, the Henry Neas Foundation, and the Lila Atchison Wallace Theater Fund of the New York Community Trust. Selected Shorts is a co-production of Symphony Space and WNYC Radio in New York, and is distributed nationwide by PRI, Public Radio International.
Support for this program comes from this station and Public Radio International stations nationwide and is made possible in part by the PRI Program Fund, whose contributors include the Ford Foundation and the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation.
PRI, Public Radio International.